Edition of the Patriots Beat Podcast. I am Brian Hines from Pat's Pulpit, joined as always by 98.5 The Sports Hub's Alex Barth. And the Patriots were back at Gillette Stadium today for their final OTA practice of the offseason. But before we break that down, we have some big Patriots news. If anyone missed it, if you were living under a rock or, away early for the weekend, it's official. DeAndre Hopkins is visiting with the Patriots next week, part of his free agency tour here. So, Alex, what's your pitch? How do you start when he comes in next week?
I am a big fat contract. I put it on the table. No, I don't even want to say the good and the bad of the visit. I want to say this is great, but. And here's why. They got to visit with him. That's big. That means he's at least willing to meet with them, which means there's a chance he'll sign with them. It means that, yes, he probably is, at least to a necessary extent, over the Bill O'Brien stuff. We know all of that. What their strategy needs to be, and I'm not the first one who said this, do not let him leave the building without a contract. And if that means you have to overpay a little bit, you have to overpay a little bit. You're not really spending any big money for the rest of the season. You're going to be able to probably trade or release Devontae Parker. So that opens up just over $6 million in salary cap space. If you have to overpay, you have to overpay a little bit. I'll get into the contract in a second. So that's all well and good. You're going to get him in the building. Only you can talk to him, and you can basically go meet his price and make sure he doesn't leave and visit anywhere else. The one problem is, and we might be on the same page here.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
The Tennessee Titans are going to have a chance to do that before the Patriots do. The report was originally Sunday. Mike Vrabel said late this week, early next week, so we don't know. But the Rappaport report this morning said whenever the timeline is, and we don't know the date of the Patriots meeting either other than next week, the Titans meeting will happen first. So the Titans can do that before the Patriots can. Here's where I'm at with the Titans. First of all, the Patriots have more than double the cap space they do, according to overthecap.com. So if Hopkins wants money, you're not getting this done for cheap. Maybe the Titans, maybe they can meet Hopkins' number to the point where he says, I'll get back to you. Are they going to be able to meet the number where he's not going to take any other visits? The other thing is, I still don't really understand why the Titans want DeAndre Hopkins. They should be trying to lose games. They're in a rebuild, and maybe Mike Vrabel doesn't subscribe to that school of thought, and I actually don't expect him to. But how aggressive are they really going to be? Whereas the Patriots desperately need this guy. So, and the other thing is the Patriots, if they're going about this the right way, can get, obviously they've talked to his team if they're setting up a visit. Maybe there's already a starting number in place that they can essentially poison pill the Titans. And, I think the Titans, according to Over the Cap, have $8.2 million. Patriots could funky with it and say, whatever the contract is we're offering, $10 million cap hit the first year. That's what that's going to have. Match that, Titans. And the Titans can't because they've done all the maneuvering to their roster they're going to do. They did that all back right before free agency. They can't open up that much more space. The contract, why don't you talk about the visit? Sorry, I'm taking over. You talk about the visit, and then I'll give what I think the contract should be.
I agree with a lot of that, right? It's kind of like in a way, a restricted free agent contract, right? Where you can finagle it so a team like Tennessee literally can't offer what you're offering. And Tennessee seems like a weird fit. Mike Vrabel does seem like that type of guy who never is going to throw in the towel and say we're rebuilding, but always want to go for it. But the three things DeAndre Hopkins said in the I Am Athlete podcast, which, what was that, 2 or 3 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago. So most importantly, that was more recently than he gave that list of quarterbacks that he wants to play for. And it was more recently than the thing about, Mahomes or whatever it was.
The face video where he's smiling.
The face video, that's what it was. Yes, it's more recently than the face video. So people say, oh, he made a face at the Patriots. Oh, well, Mac Jones wasn't on his list. What did he say the most recently? And it's
three things were great management, a QB who loves the game, and a great defense. And if you want to kind of break those down, Patriots from management perspective, from the top to bottom, right? Robert Kraft's as solid as they come. Bill Belichick, if you want to say maybe he's retiring in the short term, right? Kind of year to year, but
Right.
still he kind of seems like he's on that same window almost as DeAndre Hopkins is. So the management to
So
me would be a check.
yeah, it's going to come down to perspective. And
Mhm.
if you dig further into that quote, and I retweeted this morning, you can check it out on my timeline at Real Alex Barth on Twitter. He talks about having 4 GMs in 4 years, and he said he's had to deal with that. He doesn't want to deal with that. So the question becomes, when he says stability, even if Bill retires, it seems like the Patriots have a plan in place. There's not going to be like this massive organizational overhaul because the GMs he's had have all gotten fired and leave on their own accord. So, or maybe he says to Bill, "Hey, look, I'm not signing here to play for Gerard Mayo. I'm not signing here to play for Steve. I'm signing here to play for you. Can you tell me you're going to be here through the duration of the contract?" So now he said he trusts Belichick. He said he loves Belichick. We saw it in that video, right? The mic'd up. This to me is the most hairy one of his 3 checkpoints.
Yeah.
But if it's the Patriots are stable, the way he describes it brings it into question. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is Robert Kraft. Robert Kraft's not going anywhere. Robert Kraft isn't changing course of the organization in the next 2 or 3 years. Frankly, if he does, Hopkins is going to, it means Hopkins is cooked. If they're bad enough that Kraft has to go in a completely different direction, Hopkins is cooked anyway. He's probably going to retire because they're not going to be that bad if they land DeAndre Hopkins. So it basically comes down to, he might not have the same GM the whole time, but does he trust that? Does he trust whatever the plan is, right? We know there's some sort of plan. Gerard Mayo didn't come back here for nothing.
Yeah.
Do they let him in on whatever that plan is behind the scenes, and does he trust it? I think they would, and that he would.
And that's why, to me, it's still a check.
Yeah.
And then, so the next quarterback who loves the game, he said, "I don't need a great QB. I've done it with subpar quarterbacks. Just a quarterback who loves the game like I do." And say what you want about Mac Jones' play on the field, but it's pretty clear Mac Jones loves football, whether it's, all of his teammates talking about his work ethic, his leadership, just watching him today, 20 minutes after practice, throwing in the pouring rain. It's clear he loves football. It kind of brought me back to what, now I forget if Juju said it about Mac or Mac said it about Juju.
Mac said it about Juju. Did you listen to Catch 22 today?
I did not.
Okay, because you're going verbatim the conversation me and Evan had. Stole my take.
Mac said football nerd, right? They're all football
Yeah.
nerds. So quarterback who loves the game, Mac, I think, is an easy check there.
I mean, I think it's hard not to hear Hopkins say that. And that was the first thing that came to my mind, too, when he says, "I want a quarterback that loves the game and pushes everybody to be better." That's Mac Jones. I also, it's hard. And I talked about this. Remember when Mac made that comment at the beginning of camp? He said it's normal and it's hard not to be comparative.
Yep.
Well, Hopkins is already being comparative in these answers because he mentions that, he wants stability because he's had a different GM every 4 years. All right. So where's the comparative of this one? Well, Kyler, we know his whole thing, right? He couldn't stop playing Call of Duty long enough to watch game tape. That does not seem like Mac Jones at all.
No.
You remember a couple of years ago, I don't think you were on the beat yet. I think it was his rookie year. We asked Mac Jones what he was going to do for his bye week. No, it's Thanksgiving. What he's going to do for Thanksgiving. He said, "Well, I'll have the meal and then, watch film. There's a game." And we were like, "But are you going to go play catch in the backyard? Are you going to watch the games that are on that day?" "No, I'm just going to watch film. That's what I like to do with my time off." I think that's what, show Hopkins that clip. That should be a part of the pitch. Show him that clip because that checks that box emphatically.
It's like him having his girlfriend walk routes for him in the backyard.
Yes, that was another one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last part of that, 3-item checklist was a great defense, which is, if it's not Mac loving the game is the easiest check, a great defense. The Patriots should have a very good defense this year.
And then he says within that he wants a strong defensive line, which I personally just found very interesting because
what's a wide receiver like from playing with JJ Watt or watching Kyler Murray run around?
What does a wide receiver care about the defensive line? It's one thing he says, with a great secondary, it's like, okay, he knows he's wide receiver, he's facing these guys, he knows what a great secondary can do, but it's almost like he's looking at two teams and the money's the same and all things are the same, but team A is great pass rush. Team B is great corners, but I want to go to team like it's weird to hear a player talk philosophical football like that. It'd be Matthew Judon talking about what he looks for in an ideal wide receiver. So I don't know that it means anything. The Patriots have a great defensive line. They have a great defense. But it was just interesting to hear him get into that kind of depth about it for me personally.
Yeah, I didn't see the defensive line part, but that is an interesting kind of
He
dynamic.
kind of threw it in at the
on
end.
that.
Maybe I'm looking at it too much, but I thought it was interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. So what do you kind of I see some contract projections in the chat. I'm right like 2 years, maybe if you have to do the 3rd year, but most of the guaranteed money falls in the first 2 years. That's kind of where I'm at. Where are you thinking for where are you at for contract projections?
So this is, I wouldn't necessarily start with this, but I think if you get to the point where it's the deal to get him and not have him leave the building and all that, 3 years, 40 million, all of the guaranteed money's in the first 2 years. So this is what, right? It gets reported as 3 years, 40 million.
Big number.
Right. And that's what then his agent can go and be like, we got this guy who's 31. People worried he's washed, a 3-year deal. And then in reality, you're looking at like 2 years, 28 million, where 20 of that, 18 to 20 of that is guaranteed in the first year. And you finagle that, or you finagle the cap around it. You work the signing bonus into that. That's what I would do. That's what I think that the 3 years you're going to catch his attention with that. 40 million makes it sound like it's in the neighborhood of the Beckham contract. In reality, it's like 2 for 14 a year, which I think is a very, very reasonable contract. And then look, if he's great, you have him for that 3rd year at value. And if not, they're basically, because I already see it in the chat, when I say 3 over 40, a 2-year deal with essentially a team option for the 3rd year. It's not technically a team option, but it functions like a team option. You don't have to do void years, which is big, and they don't want to do void years. They've pretty much stopped doing that. That's
really been McCourty, right? They kind of stopped with McCourty.
McCourty was the last. Well, I guess it's technically still is on the books. McCourty's the last deal on the books they have for the 4 years. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily start there. I might start at like, 225, 230, but I think 3 years, 40 million with a team out after 2 years, 28 million guaranteed. I think that stops him from going to meet with other teams. Patriots can afford it. And it's not like a massively expensive contract for a guy that if he puts up numbers like he put up last year at $18 million a year or $14 million a year. Sorry, is the number I had $14 million a year. That contract's going to be a steal. What'd they give Aguilar? They gave Aguilar like, was it 12 and a half?
The big number was like 24 over 2.
What did his AAV end up being?
I think it was 12.
Hang on, I'm going to find it. If you can give Nelson Aguilar 12 in 2021, so coming out of the COVID cap, so his deal straight up, like the reported, was 13 a year.
Okay.
If you can give Nelson Aguilar 13 a year, you can give Hopkins 14 a year. I don't think that's unrealistic.
And they have right now projected a lot of cap room next year and, down the line because they don't have a lot of these guys signed long term. They're draft picks recently.
Yeah.
So they have the cap space. They do kind of have to get in that, you don't want to be bidding against yourself, but you want to be a good offer where, as you said, you don't want to let them leave the building, right? So you kind of have to balance that. But yeah, I think that he's probably going to want that 3rd year. So I think that would be enticing. So something right around there, I think would work.
That's where I'm at with it.
And then if you get him here, you're going to be able to free up some cap because you're going to have a lot of receivers. Someone's going to have to go. Parker and Bourne are the popular names. And I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, if you sign Hopkins, just get one of them out immediately, draft capital. I'm not really like, I'd keep them as long as possible throughout training camp because, look, Hopkins has had injury issues. He's 31. Parker has had injury issues. Tyquan Thornton in his 1 year has had injury issues. These things happen. I mean, we don't know where Juju and Thornton are right now. They're not even on the field. So I'm more keep these guys as long as possible. Then maybe at cut down day, maybe another team loses a receiver, you can trade one of these guys. I'd probably pick Parker. It's a little more money. The position, the X receiver is a little redundant. That'd be where I'm at, but I'm not pushing one of these guys out the door right away if you do sign Hopkins.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's no rush to move on from either of them. You never know what's going to happen. And maybe you figure out a way to keep all of them, but they're probably going to want to open up cap on the other side of it. In Devontae Parker, you open up $6.2 million. There's no dead cap on that. That all comes right off the books. I don't see how he's going to play enough with Hopkins on the team to justify that contract. Frankly, he might ask out. He's a veteran in a contract year. He wants to be on the field. He wants to be able to earn his money. And do you want that in the locker room? The Patriots, like, it would make all the sense in the world to move on from Devontae Parker. I know some people have said Kendrick Bourne, and the team doesn't love him. But if it was to the point where they didn't want him on the team anymore, there were so many chances for them to move on from him last summer, this spring. Like, it would have been done by now. So I think Parker is the pretty obvious odd man out when you talk about if they're able to get Hopkins. But again, I still wouldn't do it until the end of camp, just in case.
Yeah.
And by the way, you've got a young corner you just invested. Like, this is not the main reason to do it, but it's something to consider. You've got a young corner you just invested a lot in. The more good wide receivers you can throw at him in training camp to get him ready, the better. So again, just another reason to keep Parker until you absolutely have to cut him.
Yeah. And we've talked about the football fit a lot, right? He's going to come in here. He's going to be your number one guy. As we've been saying for what feels like years now, they have a bunch of quality 2s and 3s, but everyone's just a little, high up on the pecking order than they should be. This drops people down in order. So I think it's just, now that they get him in here, I think you just have to do it. It's a perfect fit. He fits with your pieces. He's obviously had success with Bill O'Brien. I think it just makes all the sense in the world from football fit and everything else.
Yeah, I said there is risk with Hopkins. He struggled to stay on the field with injuries. He has the PED suspension. He is 31. Like, I get that. I'm not sitting here saying they signed DeAndre Hopkins and they win 3 Super Bowls in a row, but they've needed a coverage dictating wide receiver for years now, basically since Rob Gronkowski retired. Because as great as Julian Edelman was, slot receivers don't dictate coverage. They just don't, not in that way. They've needed this kind of player for years. It is a make or break year for the franchise at the quarterback position, so you might as well give him the best chance possible to succeed. It is not often guys of this caliber become available. Forget, you don't have to give up anything draft-wise. I totally understand there's risks. Totally understand it. That's life. Very few decisions come without risk. When you weigh the positives and the negatives, you don't have to necessarily love everything about Hopkins, but you can't sit here and tell me the negatives outweigh the positives with this one. The upside they have, what are they really risking? If it doesn't work this year offensively, they have to hit the reset button anyway. So unless you think Hopkins somehow makes the offense worse, like the offense would be better off without Hopkins than with him, which I don't see the argument there. Maybe he's not great. Maybe he's not worth the contract, but I don't see how that makes the offense worse, right? Unless you truly believe he makes the offense worse, which again, please show me your work. They have the money. They don't have to give up any draft capital. It's a boom or bust year anyway. Where is the kill shot negative in all of this? Where is the be all end all? They shouldn't do this, because I just can't find it. And I'm usually somebody who's found it. I was sitting here last year saying, no, they don't need to go after Odell Beckham. They're not at that point in their roster building. It doesn't make sense. 2 years ago, I was saying it with whoever the hell the wide receiver. I might have been Beckham again. I don't remember. It wasn't A.J. Brown. I was in on A.J. Brown, but like
always Odell.
The equivalent, like 30-year-old injured former superstar receiver. Like, I've been a no on that guy going back since like the first time Odell Beckham was available.
Was it Julio Jones 2 years ago?
Yes. I was out on Julio Jones. I was out on Odell Beckham. So this is not the guy. This is not the weapons guy. The guy's always about talking about weapons, just sitting here talking about a guy that was really good in Madden a couple years ago. Because I think that's what you get a lot in this conversation. I did a show the other day on Bleacher Report where this guy kept asking about Jarvis Landry. No, Jarvis Landry doesn't make the Patriots better. He doesn't help them. He'd be a waste of money. The risk totally outweighs the reward in pursuing him. No, I'm not the guy that, because I think people hear people pushing for Hopkins and they assume it's that guy talking to them. I could not be further from that guy. And by the way, I was out on Beckham earlier this offseason. I didn't want Beckham. Frankly, Hopkins should get more money than Beckham did. He won't, because Beckham signed first and signed for too much, but Hopkins is a better option than Beckham was. They need to do this. They need to find a way to make this work. Whenever he's here, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whenever he's here next week, do not let him out of the building without a contract. Give him, the ground round doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, where they took Rodney Harrison to sign him. And I'm realizing we forgot to give that backstory on Catch 22 today. But take him to the ground round equivalent, whatever it is. Take him to a good food store. Take him to Davio's. I know he likes Italian food. Take him to the North End, wherever it's got to be. Get him a nice meal. Give him a fat contract and say, what do we have to do so your next flight is home to pack to move up here? And it's not to Houston, and it's not to Cleveland, and it's not to Kansas City, it's not to Buffalo. Your next flight is going to be home to pack to fly right back here to get on the field for training camp. That is what they need to do.
Are we going to get a DeAndre Hopkins at Logan Airport picture? A new one? You know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's about that time. It's about that time for it.
And I mean, Julio Jones, the last old receiver who went to Tennessee, didn't work out great. So just remember that. Yeah. I know DeAndre Hopkins is listening, but one other thought I had on this was, I wonder what Robert Kraft is looking at this and thinking, because your team, you got a pulled primetime game last year. The ticket prices were down. If he's looking at this move, this is a guy who brings some juice back to the fan base, right? Brings
Moves
some energy. You got one of these guys that looks like in Christian Gonzalez, who the fan base is really happy about. But now, like, this is DeAndre Hopkins. This is going to put butts in seats. It's going to sell jerseys. This is the guy that I think Kraft might be kind of pushing for behind the scenes here.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And I thought it was really interesting that the team doesn't always, and let me phrase this right. The Patriots media team, right? It was tweeted by the team, that report today, right? And I don't want to say they don't always do it, because they don't always meet with high value players, but like that, it would be hard for them not to notice the buzz that the team account tweeting out that Hopkins is reportedly visiting. It'd be hard for them not to notice the buzz that created.
Yep.
And I think that's important, because you hit on something there. They did have that primetime game moved last year. They're widely projected as fourth in the division. They need somebody to move the needle. And if nothing else, DeAndre Hopkins will move the needle if they sign him. For, maybe if he's bad, it wears off in November and December. But even if he's not great early on, that moves the needle. Did they make a mistake? Blah, 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 whatever. There's going to be a ton of people taking victory laps on me. But yeah, he absolutely moves the needle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's a slam dunk, kind of no-brainer. But we can transition this into OTAs today. It was the final day of OTAs. Patriots seemed like kind of a lighter session. I'm guessing after their day off Wednesday, they went hard yesterday and they toned things back today. But it was the Marte Mapy show out there. He was flying around. He was back at safety. He had a interception off Bailey Zappi. Would have been a pick six, I believe. Then he had a really nice other play later in 11s where he kind of drove downhill from the secondary, broke up a pass, almost was another interception. So he just continues to impress, and he's still in the red non-contact jersey. We haven't even seen him, because it's OTAs, we haven't even seen him get to run around and hit people, but everything we've seen from him so far just continues to impress.
Yeah, and you mentioned the no non-contact jersey. Look, the concern about him is his size. I'm not going to mince words. I think everybody pretty much knows that. But so with that comes the concern about contact. And that first fully padded practice, I don't know that I'm going to watch any other players. I might just watch Marte Mapy, because if he has a good practice that day, I mean, the brakes are off. The hype train is out of control, going a million miles an hour, right? But it's so far he checks every box, and it's more than just what he's doing. His instincts are super impressive. His ability to get, trigger and get downhill, make a read, trigger, get downhill is impressive. It honestly reminds me of Kyle Duggar at that point, and frankly still. But it's how the team is using him. I didn't trust them to use him correctly. I thought they were going to try to turn him into like a downhill middle linebacker, put weight on, but they have him off the ball. They have him rushing the passer. They have him at box safety. They played him a little bit at free safety. Like, he is everywhere, and he doesn't look uncomfortable. Granted, it's like 75% speed, but there's not a lot of second guessing in his game. There's not a lot of looking over his shoulder. There's not a lot of wasted movement. He seems to be pretty set on, this is my assignment. This is how I have to execute it. This is how I'm going to execute it. He plays with a ton of confidence. And to do that with as many, look, it's one thing to do that if you have one assignment, right? Because it's not that hard to know, or two. For him to be as confident as he is in as many assignments as he's getting in a defense as complex as the Patriots, that's all exciting. That's all super exciting.
Yeah, when the pads come on, that's going to be really, the intensity kind of picks up. Watching him, that's going to, my binoculars right there, probably right there with you. That's going to be where it is. And joining him in that secondary, once again, Christian Gonzalez back right into the mix, outside cornerback. Didn't, again, OTAs, but it's still just that athleticism, those fluid movements. It's just awesome to see him out there too every day.
Yeah, he is. I keep using this phrase, but I think it's right. He is as advertised. Everything we said about him leading up to the draft, about how well he moves, how easily he moves, the athleticism, all of it, like just seeing it at the combine, and it doesn't always look the same in person. With Gonzalez, it looks the same in person.
Mm-hmm. And we'll just knock off the rookies here, the big three rookies. Up front, Keon White also continues to impress. And they were down. Judon was still out today. Uche was out. Godchild was out. Anthony Jennings. So bigger role for him. But he's such a big dude. And his explosiveness has been kind of impressive too. And again, when the pads come on, he's going to be a guy to watch. Just that physicality up front, first step off the ball. He's looked good all around too.
Yeah, again, with him, for me, it's mostly just the how physically imposing he is. And that's what I'm excited about. He's a big dude, and it's all muscle. Like, I don't think he has any body fat on him at 285 pounds. So yeah, we're going to be able to evaluate him much more once the pads come on. But I'll kind of go back to what I said with Mapu, in that this is a team that is, the last couple of years, buried rookies, especially non first round picks. And based on what we've seen so far in OTAs, it's not like everybody's going to play 100% of the snaps, but it seems like Gonzalez was always going to play a lot. I think we knew that, but White and Mapu seem like guys that are going to have at least sizable rotational roles. We talked about this on the last show, like 50-60% usage rate, something like that, right? If they get that at a minimum, and those guys are playing well and playing up, earning that time, they're going to be in really good shape.
And we talked about Mapu's versatility. White's kind of doing the same thing. We've talked about it before, but, hand in the dirt, up in a 2-point stance. They even put him in coverage, I think.
Yeah, I don't I don't love it as much with him. They've always done this. So it's funny. My comp coming out for Keon White was Trey Flowers. And do you remember, like, they used to, on like third downs, they would drop Trey Flowers in a coverage.
Yeah.
Their best pass rusher is the Matt Patricia defense coordinator era. I remember this one game against the Steelers. This was prime Le'Veon Bell, where Le'Veon Bell motioned out of the backfield, and they had Trey Flowers covering him as a slot corner on like a key third down. Anyway,
they did it with Judon a few times.
They do it with Judon. Like, I don't love it. I get they're going to do it, and yeah, you have to do it every once in a while to keep the offense off guard. I get it, but like, to me with Keon White, I just want to see him metaphorically punching offensive linemen in the face. I want to see him you talk about how explosive he is coming out of his stance. I want to see him popping out of that stance and just bull rushing whatever offensive lineman's across from him because he's so big and so strong. It's going to be a long day for whoever's on the other side. I don't need to see him in coverage or whatever. I just want to beat the crap out of linemen and hopefully quarterbacks and running backs. That's all I really want to see him doing.
And I don't know with that like second unit defensive line today. I don't know if you noticed, but Ronnie Perkins was out there a lot, and this is a guy that's I feel like most people have forgotten about, but he had and again, OTAs will always say, but his speed, he had a few, it looked like would-be sacks. And this is a guy that was a top 100 pick. Now they have a lot of depth there. There might only be one roster spot, and it could go to a guy like DeMarcus Mitchell who's playing, special teams. But I don't know. Ronnie Perkins, third round pick, could clearly play. I'm not holding out hope for him, but I mean, is this a guy who maybe should be on our radar entering training camp? Because like last year, Anthony Jennings, no one was talking about him, and then he worked into a solid rotational piece. And I'm not saying Ronnie Perkins is going to like Josh Uche break out 10.5 sacks, but maybe work on as a situational pass rusher.
Yeah, I think on the radar is fair. The Jennings comp certainly makes a lot of sense. I still think he's on the outside looking in. At the same time, I had Jennings on the outside looking in at this time last year, and Josh Uche on the outside looking in the year before that. This seems to be how it goes with their edge rushers. He's going to have to beat out somebody. I'm trying to remember who did Jennings beat out last year. Oh, it was the defensive end they signed from the Jets, Henry Anderson.
Yeah.
So who does he beat out? It's hard to say.
It's tough because it's a loaded kind of group down there.
Right. And what Jennings did last year was impressive. It's not that easy to just go from off the roster to lock, but it can't hurt having a couple good practices. It's where we knew with Jennings, they clearly recognized what Jennings was doing. I remember like the first training camp practice, that first defensive unit went out there and we were like, oh, hey, look, Anthony Jennings is lining up as the strong side defensive, outside linebacker. So maybe we were too quick to write this guy off. Like that's where it came from. So let's see what happens when we get to camp. Did Ronnie Perkins do enough that we're going to get out there and, hey, look, it's the first team offense and it's Ronnie Perkins? Or does he still have a way to go? That's what it's going to come down to. But yeah, I think, like you said, top 100 pick, still on his rookie deal. I don't think it's unfair to say he's a guy that should be on the radar. He's not, I don't know, what's the opposite of a roster lock? I guess a camp body. He's not a camp body.
Yeah.
He's not a guy that's just here because they need bodies to run drills in camp. He has a chance to make the team. He's just got a ways to go.
Mm-hmm. So we'll transition to the offense. It was, a lot of the same install stuff. Laying the foundation, things like that. My big thing was still a lot of use of pre-snap motion and motion in general. Even Gesicki a few times. So just doing that. I know you mentioned it either last show or the show before, the setup plays, right? And that's what they seem to be really hammering home right now on the offensive side of the ball.
Which is great. You mentioned Gesicki. I think it's interesting, his usage. I've talked about this before, that one of the most exciting battles in camp is going to be Kendrick Bourne versus Tyquan Thornton for that main Z receiver role. They'll both play, but who's going to, be more often? I almost feel like we should put Mike Gesicki in that conversation because he can do some of that stuff. Now he wins differently, and all three of them win differently. So they're all three are going to play, but yeah, his usage has been very interesting. I'll throw it out there because I want to beat this narrative dead into the ground. There is no quarterback competition. It was Bailey Zappi had one half of a walkthrough period early in practice with the ones. Besides that, it was all Mac Jones. So I want to throw that out there again. But yeah, I mean, it looks, I just did a podcast with Bob Sosi. People can check out on 985thesportshub.com. And we were talking about it, just kind of looking back on the 3 days and the two things that Bob said came to him, which I think are great points. It looked normal, which was Mac Jones' word back on the first day of practice, and professional, which was another word that came up. And I don't know that we should be doing jumping jacks over, the word, what was the word I used? It was It's refreshing. It was refreshing,
Yeah.
which I don't know that we should be doing jumping jacks over the offense looking refreshingly normal in the spring, on June 9th, but that's kind of where we are. That's kind of where last year brought us. So that's, what we've gotten to.
So who would be your leader in the club if you're putting out a formation in that zero, considering you have Parker or say even Hopkins at the X, you have Henry out there. Where are you going in that zero? Because I'd probably lean Taekwon just because what his skill set can bring. And you hope you can develop that top 50 pick, but his speed, opening things up, that's where
Yeah.
I would go. But, with Gesicki, and they're all going to play, like you said, but what would your kind of preference be there, you think?
Ideally, I wanted a three-way split because that's what it should have been last year. They should have been rotating all their receivers because that's the strength. They have such a diverse skill set. But if I had to pick one, at least to start the season, I get it with Thornton, and he's a top 50 pick, and he has that speed and all that, and he should play a significant role. But Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne just work so well together.
Yeah.
And Kendrick Bourne really showed, I think, another gear that most people didn't expect him to have in that 2021 season before he got benched last year. So as crazy as this sounds, because I can't think of a better word than ceiling. Because obviously Tyquan Thornton has a better ceiling as we traditionally think about it. He's younger. He's got the speed, all of that. But I just feel like the potential, if Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne really get things going, is significant. Whereas Thornton can be good, but there's that it thing, that indescribable thing about Mac and Bourne when they had it going at times in 2021. I go back to the Cleveland game. I go back to the Dallas game that give me some of that. Give me some more of that. That was a lot of fun to watch.
Or what was his big game last? Was that Cincinnati home last year when he had that big game?
Yeah, I think so. And then even look at the Miami game. The first game of the year, he's benched. We don't know what's going on. He comes in cold late in the fourth quarter, 46 yards down the sideline like that. He was their leading receiver in that game. He played 2 snaps. Get that guy going. Get that guy in a rhythm. Shouldn't be this hard, but that's not to say I have anything against Tyquan. I want him to play too. I think his speed is absolutely an important factor. But again, just when Kendrick Bourne and Mac Jones get it going,
there's something there.
It works. It works. And people will say, well, maybe it's not sustainable. And this, I'd rather it be proven not sustainable because I keep it going until you can't anymore.
Yeah, I'm big on the KB train. I
think, and this is also a good comment in the chat here from Josh. The second part of this, Kendrick Bourne's route tree is more expansive than Tyquan Thornton's is. And I think that's a part of it. Kendrick Bourne's going to attack at all 3 levels. Maybe Tyquan's added that to his game. We're really not going to know until the pads come on this summer. But for the time being, with the information we have, give me the guy that can play at all 3 levels.
Yeah. And he said, deep stuff. That's where I feel where Tyquan can help. Because even you look at something practice today.
Yeah.
They hit one. Was it complete or was it incomplete? The deep ball to Parker. And then I forget if that one fell incomplete or not. And then they they try to seam to Henry, but other than that, it felt, shorter, condensed, where I feel like that's where Thornton can come in and, open things up. Even though that's not really O'Brien's offense, he wants to attack the middle of the field. Like they had that sequence where it was Parker on the dig and then Henry on a nice seam, like middle of the field. That's where Mac Jones is good. That's where O'Brien likes to attack. But getting Thornton in there at times to open things up, I think that would do big things for their offense too.
Yeah.
So, anything else overall?
Yeah, actually, I got one more point on offense.
All right.
I don't know that it's going to ultimately matter, but do you notice a couple of the depth receivers made some plays today?
Raleigh Webb
made a couple nice catches. And the other guy, and I think he's if everybody else is going at 65, 70%, he's probably going at 80, but Edley's got a little something, little something to his game. He's got that kind of Demario Douglas kind of he's quick, man. He's quick twitch, and he made some nice catches today too. I don't know what I've seen very little of him. I've seen 2 OTA practices, but he's got the talent to compete for a practice squad spot. He's not going to make the roster, but I don't think he's that far behind a guy like Trey Nixon. right? He might be, and he should be, because he's been playing the position his whole life, looks better as a receiver than Malik Cunningham does. Now, obviously, Malik Cunningham brings other value to the table, but Ed Lee should compete for a practice squad spot on this team. I truly believe that.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting battle because you're going to have the two rookies, and now you have Malik Cunningham making that transition, and Ed Lee, and Rally Webb was making plays today. So they have a lot of, that practice. What are they? 2, 3 receivers on the practice squad, depending how many they keep on they usually keep 5, but maybe they keep 6 with the 2 rookies now on the 53-man roster. But that's going to be a good competition
and that's all before DeAndre Hopkins too.
Yeah. Another body into the mix. What do you think, speaking of that, what are the odds because they usually keep 5 wide receivers, not counting Slater.
Right.
Where we are now, do you think there's room for 6 with Booty and Douglas?
I had 6 on my last roster projection. I've kind of started getting ahead on my next one, which will be up after minicamp. I still have them keeping 6. Now, Kayshon Boutte was limited on Tuesday, didn't practice today. We'll see what he looks like at minicamp. He kind of makes a lot of sense as a Foxborough flu guy.
Yeah.
But some of it's going to be really weird this year because some of it comes down to Mike Gesicki too. Do they see Mike Gesicki's a wide receiver? And now they're at 7 receivers and 1 tight end. And then, if they see Gesicki as a tight end, you can justify 6 receivers, whether it's the 4 veterans and the 2 rookies they have, or you take off Parker, Boutte, and you add DeAndre Hopkins. You can justify that in Henry and Gesicki as being your pass catching group. If Gesicki's a wide receiver, not only are you now at 7 wide receivers, you do need another tight end. And then we start talking about, is it Anthony Ferkser as a backup to Hunter Henry? Is it Johnny Lumpkin as a blocker? Does Scotty Washington factor in? So then it becomes a different conversation. It's going to be really interesting to see how they juggle that. That's what it's going to come down to. But taking everything at face value, Mike Gesicki's a tight end, DeAndre Hopkins isn't here, all of that, I do think that there is a way they carry 6 wide receivers. I do think that is very much a possibility. And the other one, frankly, to muddy it further, we see Ty Montgomery get wide receiver reps. Yeah. So where is he? Is he at receiver? Is he a running back? I don't know how they make this work with the bodies. This is probably a scenario where somebody gets hurt because there's too many guys for them to make the cuts to get to this point, but I could see it where they look at it and they keep 4 wide receivers and say, we have Mike Gesicki and Ty Montgomery who can both play those spots. And we're going to keep 4 wide receivers and we're going to keep a couple on the practice squad if we need them, maybe 1 more than we usually do. Now, that's without names. They're not going to get down to 4 wide receivers because then you're cutting one of Juju, Parker, Bourne, Thornton. Who am I missing? Juju, Parker, Bourne, Thornton.
That's your top. No, those 4 would make it.
Right.
And then you'd be cutting either like Booty, Douglas, and then all the other rookies.
So maybe that's how it would be. Yeah, so maybe that's how it would work.
4 veterans, and then say Gesicki and Montgomery can play wide receiver if we need them.
Yeah, so they could keep anywhere from 4 to 6. It really comes down to how they view Montgomery and how they view Gesicki.
And I mean, I hope the rookies stay around. I just love Booty's potential. I don't know if that's a guy that I want to let maybe walk, especially if he has a good summer. And then Douglas, I think, could do a lot of give you that Marcus Jones package maybe day 1, and then, ease him in as a rookie because, you have Juju in the slot and you have the 4 veterans. So if he gives you that Marcus Jones package, it's a unique way to get him on the field and his skill set. So I like all of them. I like the 6, but that is going to be interesting to watch that unfold because we mentioned Gesicki and Montgomery is repping mainly with the receivers.
You did hit on something important there, though, that I do want to see them try to keep Douglas because I do think it's important that they have somebody to play the Marcus Jones role so they can run that package regularly without overusing Marcus Jones. I also want to remind people that the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now new customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So what for those who don't really gamble, what that means is you place your first bet, it's up to $1,000. As if you like qualify for this, right? And go to the FanDuel app to check it out. If the bet doesn't win, they put that $1,000 right back in your account. So there you go. And we got an NBA Finals game tonight. Heat trying to even things up at 2-2. Nuggets trying to really take this thing over. And it's been a fun series to bet on because there's been a lot of little quirks in that. So there is no better place to bet all playoff. There is no better place to bet all playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/Boston and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Well, unless you had anything else offensive and defense, we did get our first kind of kicking competition today.
Yep.
Nick Folk was there for the first time in front of us. Him and Chad Ryland both did some kickoff work, and then at the end of practice, they alternated kicking field goals. I had Folk 2 of 4. Ryland kicked 3. He went 1 of 2 on the first one. I couldn't tell from where I was.
He hit the last one. It was the 55-yarder. Yeah. It is worth noting, though. So if you've ever been in training camp, you know this. The farthest goalpost from like where the fans sit is narrow. I think it's like 33%. So they were kicking one of their misses each would have been good on a regular goalpost. Mm-hmm. So for whatever that's worth.
Yep. So that was our first small look.
Yeah.
Folk was first up, if you want to read into that. But as we've said, go for it.
No, I think it's interesting that Folk was getting kickoff work because last year when he started to struggle at the end of the season with kicking field goals, a lot of people pointed to, well, he's now also doing kickoffs, and is that the wear and tear? So I figured even if we made the team, it would be Behringer, who wasn't there today, or Corliss Waitman handling kickoffs. We didn't see Waitman take any kickoffs today. He was there. It was just Folk and Ryland.
He didn't even punt at all either, right? They didn't do
any punt. Well, they did mostly punting the first 2 days we were there. And who knows what they're doing behind the scenes, I guess. But they hadn't done a lot of kickoff stuff in the open practices.
Mm-hmm. So I believe that's all I got. Anything, wrap it all up that you got?
I want to throw in a quick Boston Sports Minute here because Chris Sale got moved to the 60-day IL. He's got some thing with his shoulder. He doesn't need surgery, but he can't pitch for a month. And
what
go back over it.
Few days by the Boston Red Sox.
Oh yeah, banner couple days for the local ball club. They totally seem in control and know what they're doing. It's excellent. I wasn't even going to get into that because it's just frankly too frustrating, and there's certain things that were done that just frankly don't deserve attention. But I will say, when it comes to Sale, if and when he comes back, and they'll probably be long out of it at that point, but you still got next year and however many more years he's on this Fakakta extension. Put him in the bullpen. He can't start. He doesn't have the physical durability to throw 5, 6, 7 innings every 5 days. Even if he's good when he does it, use him in an Andrew Miller role. 2 or 3 innings every 3 days. That is how you're going to maximize him. He cannot start. He is broken. And this shouldn't come as a surprise. I don't know how many people realize this. When Chris Sale came up with the White Sox, he was a closer because he had that funky delivery and he threw really hard, and everybody kind of knew, hey, he doesn't have the durability to start, but he's filthy, so we're going to stick him in the pen. And then, like 2 or 3 years in, the White Sox, kind of like the Red Sox do now, they really needed a starter. They had a bad run of starting pitching. And instead of calling up a guy who washed out in the Japanese league, among many reasons he should have been disqualified for making that start, they said, you know what, Chris Sale, just start a couple games. You're a starter in college. We'll see what happens. And he was too good for them to move him back to the bullpen. But I think the plan in Chicago always was, and we've seen this happen with guys. John Schmaltz is a great example. I think the plan was eventually, if he'd stayed in Chicago, for him to go back to the bullpen. It's what the plan should have been. We're at that point. He's not a starter. He can't do it. I don't care how good he is in the windows where he does it. I'd rather see him for 100 innings out of the bullpen than 50 innings all combined into like a month and a half before he goes on the IL pitching out of the rotation. So I had to get that off my chest. It sucks he's hurt. He was pitching well. I feel for the guy who's worked his ass off to get back here, but he's not a starting pitcher anymore. He's just not. He doesn't have the durability to do it. Put him in the bullpen, which they need pitching in the bullpen too. And yeah, it sucks. You don't have enough starters. You could have fixed that by signing actual starting pitching instead of these, internationally washouts and guys like James Paxton, who when you signed him, his elbow didn't work. Go sign real pitching with functioning elbows and shortstops with functioning knees. So you don't have to put Kike Hernandez over there. It's just turning into a bigger thing. But holy crap, just sign baseball players who can actually physically play the game and you don't have to run into problems like this.
Their pitching staff, it's kind of like the Patriots wide receiver room. Because I remember they went into this offseason and they were like, they were counting on Sale being the one, but they're like, we're going to get a few really strong 2 guys so then everyone else bumps down into the roles they should be. And then we just ended up with Corey Kluber, who is washed.
Well, let's hope not, because the difference to me is I think a lot, and it's true, all of the Patriots receivers are real number 2s, but are probably number 2s, but they're number 2s. Right? They should be able to be a solid number 2 receiver. Corey Kluber's not a number 2 starter. Corey Kluber's not a number 5 starter. If we're going to compare it to the Patriots receivers, Brian, I thought you were going in another direction. This is like the 2020 Patriots wide receiver room. You have N'Keal Harry and Dante Moncrief and Quincy Adebanyeho. And who else is in that room? Marquise Lee. They're trying to make Marquise Lee work. There's Corey Kluber is Marquise Lee. It's unacceptable.
Talent-wise, but just like guys above their role almost.
They thought they were getting the 2022 Patriots wide receiver room. They got the 2020 Patriots wide receiver room.
Yeah. But I remember, you feel for Chris Sale, but I remember we were at Gillette last year and you were like, you can't count on him for anything. Anything you get out of him is bonus. And what'd they get? 10 starts? How many? 10, 15, 12 starts?
I think it was 12.
Did he even? Yeah. So
yeah,
I don't know. This seems it was going downhill already, but this, unless Adam Duvall, MVP Adam Duvall is back.
Right. He was hitting 400 before he got hurt, so we'll see. But the way their luck's going this year, Brian, you really think he's going to come back and keep hitting that way?
No, they're gonna have to win every game 9-7 or something like that.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
All right, I had to bring that up real quick.
All right, well, that'll do it from us. That'll do it from OTAs. Patriots will be back next week, Monday through Wednesday, for a mandatory mini camp. Media will be there all 3 days, so we will have shows coming at you. Turn on your Patriots Press Pass notifications to know when we are going live. But until then, if you need some reading over the weekend, follow Alex on Twitter at RealAlexBarth. Read all of his stuff at 985thesportshub.com. You can follow me on Twitter at I am Brian Hines. Read all my stuff at patspulpit.com. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful weekend.